When you dare to share, you break the silence. When you dare to share, you speak your truth. When you dare to share, you use the full strength of your voice. When you dare to share, it brings opportunity to own your story. So tell it, be heard, and at the same time, your sharing is someone else's learning, inspiration, motivation, empowerment, and hope. There's always an element to each of our stories that remains a secret. For some, we feel it's a dirty little secret. Dare to share your untold story exposes these secrets in a welcoming and positive way. I encourage each of you out there to dare yourself to share what is yours to tell. When we dare, it is the courage to do something really important. Let this be a vow to each and every single one of us that we take risk, we brave, confront, and face what is, while inspiring and empowering all communities. So let's break that silence and tap into mental beauty. This is Salima Jadavji, your podcast host, a practicing clinical social worker, and your mental wellness connoisseur. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast, episode number 21, From Conservative Patriarchy to Sexual Health and Eroticism. To all my fellow listeners, before we get started, I'm just dropping in a note to give you a heads up that this podcast might be emotionally triggering for you. We do invite guests onto the show who share openly about extremely difficult life moments with exposure and impact of what the struggles have been like. The intensity of each episode could have a variable impact on your emotional and mental well-being based on your own personal story. If at any point the topic becomes uncomfortable or upsetting to you in any way, please do not pressure yourself to listen. Instead, be kind to yourself, do some self-care, and perhaps give another episode a try. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our daring guest, Kelly Schwartz. Kelly is an erotic expert and health coach who has been working in the areas of sexuality and expression for more than a decade. A published author and graduate of the Institute of Integrative Nutrition's program in holistic health coaching, she holds a master's degree in critical theory and is a PhD candidate in erotic literature. She is a seasoned speaker who appears on many media platforms, sharing her knowledge and educating others on topics like self-intimacy, self-seduction, and erotic literature. Kelly is originally from Mexico City and lives in Toronto, where her health coaching practice lives while she has the ability to serve clients around the world. Well, hello there, Kelly. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast.
Thank you. Pleasure being here with you.
Kelly, it's so good to be able to have you on the show today and to be able to speak with you. It really means a lot to me that you're here and that you're eager and keen and willing to do this, because I'm just really thankful for your support, for taking a stance to help break barriers of mental stigma.
Oh, my pleasure. It's thank you for having me. I think the subjects you touch upon are incredibly important to talk about, and the more we talk about them, the less stigma they have.
Exactly. That's my point. Exactly. And so that's what this podcast is about. It's about bringing forward untold stories of things that people go through, whether it's directly about a mental health struggle or something else. And we know that no matter what the story really is about, there is impact to a person's mental health in some way. And typically it remains tucked away. So that's why it's really important for me to have brought this platform forward, just as a way to break barriers of mental stigma, especially, it being so highly conditioned in our society. And then the presence of myself and yourself to really encourage people to share and tell what they might have reservation for sharing. And so with that, I'm bringing forward a trend called the mental beauty rethink. I'm curious, Kelly, what's your take on the idea of the mental beauty rethink?
Tell me. I would love to know more. So rethinking mental health. What do you mean? Can you expand on it?
Yeah. So, as I was mentioning that our society, we're highly sensitive to the word words mental health. There is a negative connotation that comes with that. When people hear it, sometimes they start to cringe or, kind of back away. It becomes an uneasy topic and wouldn't have the same reaction if someone was talking about physical health or even mentioning the words physical health. So I'm really hoping to introduce the idea of mental beauty the way we would talk about physical beauty. So that's what that's all about.
Well, it's the same the way we say now neurodiverse as opposed to like there's something wrong with you, right? You're just different. Your brain is working differently, and it doesn't mean that you're broken. It just means, well, your mental health, your mental is works differently.
Yeah. And I guess for me, it's also more about just embracing all aspects of yourself, like whether, because mental health and physical health are combined, bring the overall wellness of a person. I mean, of course, there's emotional health and spiritual health, but in those two realms.
But I love what you just said. I was just reading the other day this post from a friend of mine about the
Mm-hmm.
toxic positivity and how like just trying to be joyful and happy all the time can and positive can turn out to be like really bad, because that means that a lot of the emotions that you have and that we have, especially like in the last year and a half in which things are really really difficult, are invalid. Like you should not be having a hard time, you should not be sad, you should not be depressed, you should be joyful and grateful and happy all the time. And that's just not possible.
Yeah, and that's just not real. Real. It doesn't do justice to what optimism or positivity is actually all about, right? Like if someone is having a terrible time, and you say, "Well, just get over it. It's not that bad."
Yeah, or just like look on the bright side.
Yeah, look on the bright side. Exactly. Looking on the bright side. Yes, you can look on the bright side, but it is very invalidating, as you said, for a person who is actually experiencing it. And I think something that might be a little softer is like, wow, that seems to be like really tough for you, right? Like, is there something that I can do to help you feel better in this moment, right?
Yeah, and having some empathy and compassion,
Exactly.
as opposed to trying to fix or trying to change what that person is living right now. Like they can't, if you don't go through the experience, if you don't go through the emotion, then you'll get stuck there. There's this really fabulous book by Emily Nagoski and her sister, and Amelia Nagoski, called Burnout. I'm not sure if you are familiar with it. And it is, they talk exactly about that, about getting stuck, right? You don't want to feel these things, therefore you try to move forward or away from these emotions, and then you burn out because you're stuck in them. Like it's a tunnel, and if you don't go through the whole process of the tunnel then and get to the other side, you will get stuck in there.
Right. And so it's all of these moments that become educational for us to help us with that mental beauty rethink. And I'm glad that you brought up the book. So, Kelly, I've got some exciting questions for you today. Well, like they're exciting for me.
Okay, I'm eager. Okay, surprise me. Go for it.
Okay, I hope you're ready. Okay, so the first question. Kelly, give us the newspaper headline of how you would title your untold story. What would it say?
It was not supposed to be this way.
It was not supposed to be this way?
Yeah, I guess that's part of it. Or like it was not supposed to be this way. Semicolon, surprise. Life is life is different. I don't, yeah. It was not supposed to be this way. The different paths to take.
Yeah, tell me more about these paths. I'm curious about what the theme is that's driving this headline.
Well, I grew up in a very conservative family, in a very conservative country, in a very conservative religion, and life was very much set the same way, like it's set when you go to kindergarten, then you go to primary school, then you go to high school, and then you go to university. Like it was very set, and there was no moving outside of that set. And then like you get married, you have children, like it's all very, like a path is very much drawn for you. With some variance, obviously, but it was very, very much drawn for me, and I was unhappy with what was drawn for me, and I wanted something different. So I had to fight really, really hard to get the different things I wanted. yeah, I ended up in a way in a similar situation to what was paved for me. I am married and I do have children, but I am married because I wanted to, not because I had to.
Mm-hmm.
And I married in my 30s as opposed to in my early 20s. And I had children because I wanted to have children and not because that
Mm-hmm.
was what I was supposed to do. So I had
Right.
yeah, I just took a different kind of journey.
Yeah, doing it in a way that was good for you and right for you, even if it led you to a similar outcome. But the process was something that you could engage with more and be more present with and it be more pleasant as well.
That's right. Yep.
So Kelly, I'm curious. Please share more about your. Maybe this is a segue into your untold story. Take it over.
Oh, it's like I feel like we all have many untold stories.
Mm-hmm.
It just depends what part you want to listen to, what part you want to hear. It's I'm the third child of a family of four. But the other three siblings are
Mm-hmm.
boys, they're brothers. Um, but my mom did the best she could within her circumstances and within her own view of the world. But I was always treated very differently from my brothers. My brothers studied abroad since high school or even younger, and all I wanted was to leave the house and go study abroad. But
Mm-hmm.
girls stay in the house. Like that was my mom's answer was always like, no, girls grow up in the house. And yeah, and then there was like this path that I had to take. There was not a lot of like different kind of roads that I was supposed to take or that I could take. I remember meeting after my first semester in university. I was studying medicine at the time, and I met these men. I guess right now I would call them boys, but back then they were men. And they're European. They were Dutch, and they were just fun. And I remember like seeing their life, and like it suddenly dawned on me that a different kind of life was possible. And it wasn't that they had that their life was that much different. They did have a different life to what I was like geared towards, but
Mm.
it just they created a really great impression on me because I was like, oh, so I can have a different kind of life. I can
Mm-hmm.
do things differently. I do not need to do them the way I'm doing them right now. I don't. So I.
It's like that realization.
Yeah,
Like you
absolutely.
had that realization that I can have my life on my own terms. What you've been sharing is about the prescription of a woman in your culture and the parenting and being a female child with lots of boys and noticing that your parenting, how you were parented was different. And so when you were studying medicine and you had this realization that, hey, I could have a life that's different than this, that's different than this prescription. What's the first thing that you did differently?
Well, I told my mother I didn't want to study anymore, that I was done
Mm-hmm.
with medicine and I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to travel and write.
Mm-hmm.
I had always been writing and I wanted to do
Mm-hmm.
that. And she said, well, that sounds wonderful, but you need to study something.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do that once you bring me a paper.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, looking back, I could have totally done it without going to
Mm-hmm.
study something. But I didn't have the means, the economic means, and I didn't have uh, the capability to think that I could do it. To just hop on a
Mm-hmm.
plane, go somewhere, find a job, and that it in my culture where we were like, you don't get summer jobs like here in Canada. I see all the teens
Mm-hmm.
having summer jobs, and even when you're there in university, you have summer jobs, and it's not really the norm where I come from.
Right.
And even if you did
Okay.
get a summer job, it would pay like not the same to earn pesos than to earn Canadian dollars.
Right.
Right. I had a friend years ago who was working as she's Australian and she worked as a cashier at a supermarket, and with the money she made she traveled the world, and I'm like, that's not even possible. Like you can't.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a low wage job in Mexico would buy you a meal, right? It's not. It will not take you around the world.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So the first thing is I quit medical school.
Okay.
And then I went to study basically just for the paper to have I went to study literature.
And so When you say you went to study literature, is that the point when you were studying the erotic literature, or did that come later?
Well, I no, I mean yes and no. I mean I've always been into erotic literature. No, when I really focused on erotic literature as a specialty was in my master's when I did critical theory. That
Okay.
was my focus, and then in my PhD, as I decided like if I was going to delve myself into doing
Mm-hmm.
something very academic and kind of boring, because I
Mm-hmm.
personally find academia kind of boring, even though I have been an academic for a large part of my life,
Right.
to do it about something that is fun.
Yeah. Something that's really passionate for you.
Yes. So, I find erotic literature really, really fun and really difficult to write and to
Mm-hmm.
find like you either find like porno, like it's very pornographic or very like novela rosa, like romanticized and kind of boring. So it's like to find the good stuff is
Like a soap opera.
yeah, so it's really hard to
Mm-hmm.
find it, and but when you do,
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing. So, and when you study literature, you study many other things, and you focus on many. So you study
Right.
psychology and sociology and history, and it's
Right.
not just like
Many aspects.
reading a book, right? You
Right.
are delving deep into the psyche. That's why I mean one of my big loves in life has always been books. I that's
Right.
My husband is he doesn't complain, but he could complain that his biggest adversary in the bed is
Mm-hmm.
a book because I'm always reading.
Right. So I'm curious, Kelly, when you were studying the erotic literature and sexuality and peeling away all of those different topics, your family knew about it. Did you get any messages from them or any like dismissal or commentary?
Yes, my family knew, but I did get commentary when I was doing my PhD, and I was dating. My grandmother used to tell me like, you don't need to tell the
Mm,
boys what you do,
like hide who you are.
or not. You don't need to. Rather, please don't tell the boys what you do, as if what I was doing was yes, like shameful, right? Like, oh, you don't want the like a nice
Mm-hmm.
Jewish boys who want to get married to know that you're like doing sex stuff. Like that is just not proper.
And that's not proper because in the culture, it's like you need to be marriage
Well,
material.
because it would say things about me, or it would like, or would men would assume things, which they did. Many did
Mm-hmm.
assume they either got terrified that I would know more just by looking at them,
Mm-hmm.
or they would get like assume certain things about me which were not true.
Mm-hmm.
And try to surpass consent, for example.
Right.
Not that they did, but
Right.
yeah, it was just like if you do certain things, then people will see you a certain
Mm-hmm.
way.
That was the message behind it.
That was more the message that was sent my way, but that wasn't it wasn't the way. Well, at least when I met my husband, he didn't know what I did, and I don't think I mentioned it very much on our first date. But then by our second date, we met on a blind date through a matchmaker who finds people on the subway. That's like a whole other story. But
Right.
he didn't have my last name or my email address or anything of mine before our first date, and afterwards he did. And by our second date, he had completely Googled me, and he thought I was the coolest thing in the world to be studying and doing what I do. So obviously, I found like the right man.
That's awesome. Yeah. That feeling of acceptance and someone knowing all parts of you and being okay with that too,
Yeah, and
right?
excited about them too.
And yeah, excited for sure. So I'm wondering, yes, we've fast forwarded to talking about the education and everything that you've pursued, but I'm wondering back in your earlier years, like when you were in school, in Mexico City, was sex education part of the curriculum?
Oh no,
No?
absolutely not. Like my the biology books, like the teacher I had actually tore out the 2 or 3 pages that had the human body on them.
Hmm. And then I guess I'm curious about what got you so curious about the subject. If sex education was not part of the education.
I think exactly because of that.
Was it exactly because
Well,
of
I
that?
think I was partly, I think
Okay.
sex is fun, and I've always thought sex was fun. I experimented. I was lucky and I didn't have aggressive or violent experiences in my early teens or early adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't have any sexual education, and the information that had been trickled down to me was like, it was so meager. I
Mm-hmm.
I looked things up, and I researched, and
Mm-hmm.
I ended up, and it wasn't just me who didn't know, and it wasn't just me by
Mm-hmm.
being Jewish. It was like when I went to university with non-Jewish people, like it was like ignorance was everywhere.
Right.
Nobody knew anything. Um, about their bodies, about pleasure, about consent, about it's just like that. The amount of ignorance is was appalling, and
Okay.
because I knew things,
Mm-hmm.
because I looked them up and I was researching all the
Mm-hmm.
time,
Mm-hmm.
then people would come to me to ask me questions. So I ended up being like the person who knew. So or the person who you could talk to when things happened. Like,
Right.
oh, I want to tell you about this adventure, because they knew I wasn't going to judge,
Right.
because I would be like, "Oh, tell me more. Did it feel like?" Instead of being
Right.
like, "Ooh, that sounds terrible, and you should, burn."
Yeah, you didn't cringe or turn away. It got you more curious.
I'm very curious.
Yeah.
I was helping
Mm-hmm.
couples open up their relationship. I was helping couples close them up. I was helping people experiment with, with other with their same sex experiments. I was the one who was
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the very non-judgmental and very open about things that usually are not, right, that everything most people learned about was or most people learned about everything was through movies or television, and I knew more, and I had the books, and I had the research, and I had the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's I guess what got me, and then obviously the erotic literature just turned it into more an academic subject.
Right.
um, and
Mm-hmm.
then I went from there. But I was always interested. I always thought like, oh, if people were more aware of their bodies, if people were more sexually satisfied, then there would be no wars.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just imagine our politicians, if they were getting
Right.
laid like
Yeah.
really nicely and well, and if they knew their bodies, like, wouldn't like the pandemic look different? I think so, or I'd like to think so. I think people would be making different decisions. All the anger and all the angst and all their stress, like, sex is fun, sex is amazing, and sex is a very intrinsic part of who we are. We tend to separate
Right.
our sexuality from the rest of our lives, as if it was this bubble, this isolated bubble that can't be touched,
Right.
when it is like the other way around. Like, it's completely and absolutely connected. It's I would turn it around for you. Like, if people can separate their mental health from the rest of their lives.
Well, that's exactly it, right? That's what has been happening, and we're learning that that's not really possible. And that parallel in what you're talking about, it's very much the same, right? The worlds are not separate. It's a collaboration. These are all parts of our life, right?
Yeah,
And so it's about being able to welcome it and inquire and be inquisitive and
absolutely.
explore and be willing to just take risks, whatever they are. I find your narrative so fascinating, growing up in this very patriarchal world where you describe women are supposed to be a certain way and nice and not very outspoken. Yes, you should have education, but everything is supposed to be sort of geared or like preparing women for marriage and children, and that's what life is supposed to be. And I'm so fascinated how you rewrote that story for yourself, right? And how you said at the start of our conversation that yes, I am married, and but because I wanted to be, and not because I needed to, right? And that you have children not because you were told you're supposed to have kids, but because you wanted to, and you got married on your own terms, in your 30s as opposed to in your 20s, and really learning and allowing yourself to learn what your passions were and what your interests were, rather than what you were being told someone's telling you to do, right? So I'm really fascinated by how you've connected all of this. and turned it into such a different outcome.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's been a journey and it's been a struggle. It
Yes.
has not been easy.
No, I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of hurdles and obstacles and mountain and things that must have felt like mountains along the way. Kelly, tell me. So I want to know more about how you were affected having gone through the conservative patriarchy and, being able to then take steps to learn about erotic literature. Were there other intense moments that you experienced?
Yes. I mean, it's well, when you go against everything that supposedly gives you value.
Mm-hmm.
I had this aunt whom I really love, and she saw me grow up, and she sent me this email for my birthday about 2 years ago, and she said,
Mm-hmm.
"You made it. You took you a while, but you finally made it. Because I'm married and I have 3 kids." And it was so upsetting to me
Mm.
because her email basically said like all the value that I had was
Oh,
my uterus, and my capability of procreating, and the fact that I have a husband. So
right. But everything else was dismissed. And that's what, were you feeling that?
everything, yeah, right, her email, what her messaging was that everything else was dismissed. It doesn't matter,
Mm.
like all my academic or my own business, or the fact that I kick ass human, or like the adventures I've had moving countries, like nothing had, or the people I help, like the lives I change, which I do, and that's why I love the work I do so much, because I change people's lives to the better.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Right.
it was all dismissed just because I was right. My value was just intrinsic in the fact that I was married and had children. So it has been difficult.
Right. So she was waiting for you to check.
Yeah.
She was waiting for you to have those check marks of got married, has husband stayed, has children. Those are the check marks,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And then how did you work through that process after feeling that all of that upset?
Well, I think lots of therapy. I've gone
Mm-hmm.
through. I used to say that I had a PhD in therapy because I've been going through therapy from a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
Different therapists for different things.
Right.
Um, so lots of therapy, surrounding myself by the right people, right? Getting rid of the people who just don't serve me and who don't make me feel good about who I am or what I'm doing, even if those people are family.
Right.
I have a cousin who I grew up with, but like in my adulthood, I've realized like she's been bullying me my whole life. She treats me horribly, even as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I don't need this person in my life. There's no need for, even if we grew up together. Like, yeah. It's so, yeah, therapy, journaling,
Right.
doing things that are good for me, being grateful. I have this thing. I like to try different things that bring me joy and
Mm-hmm.
learn. I love learning things. So currently, like last week, I've been knitting for many years, but I haven't knitted
Mm-hmm.
I haven't knitted sweaters in many years because children, or socks.
Mm-hmm.
And last week I spent an hour with a yarn lady, like a yarn lady, a yarn store, because you can't go into a yarn store. So on the phone, just figuring out the colors for a sweater that I'm going to make. And that just brings me so much joy because it's not related to my clients or to my
Right.
children or to my husband or to anything. It's just like pure joy for me.
Right.
So finding those moments of joy.
Right.
What else? Working out for me is a
Mm-hmm.
big part of my mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Much more than my physical health is like it's my mental. If I don't work out, I go to a very dark place.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I think that's like a really large
Mm-hmm.
answer for your question.
No, it's a large answer, yes. But it was packed with lot of goodness, right? Like so, it's like packed with nutrients, right? So I mean, there was a lot in there,
Yeah.
and it's interesting to see. Like, yes, this is the narrative that was sort of you were living by, and then you broke free from it, and then you figured out a way to move through and then be in the new place and the new space that you created for yourself and then be okay with it, right? And so when you talk about all of the tools and strategies and feeling like you had a PhD in therapy, or doing journaling or having gratitude exercises and bringing joy forward, by by doing activities that really bring pleasure to you and excitement to you, and peace. And also being very much aware that exercise is important for my mental well-being, because then I'm able to have that release. You're creating a special toolkit for yourself, and that's important.
Yeah, and it changes, right? That like that toolkit changes. Like there's things that I did not appreciate or did I not see as important when I was single. Like for me, being
Right.
single, I was alone all the time, and I love being alone, but I didn't appreciate how much it was important to me to be alone until I got married or until I have kids.
Right. Absolutely. At every phase, when we're in a different phase, we start to reflect on what was different, what was good, what we can bring in the new space.
Yeah, and in the new life, right? Like a long time ago, what feels like decades and decades ago for me, some mental health
Mm-hmm.
would be to go to a coffee shop or to a restaurant by myself and have like a meal um, with a book or with my computer by myself. Now that is not possible. And I don't know
Yeah.
when that will be possible again, but that used to be a really big thing for me. Like what the pandemic has done in a way has been like, I need to find new ways because everything I had in my toolkit is gone. Like
Right.
I can no longer see friends. I can no longer go to the gym. I can no longer find new things. Like one of the new things again that I have found in the last year and a half has been I go to nature by myself for walks, which I didn't used to. It's not a thing that I grew up with. I grew up in a really very urban city, but now that is like part of my, calming my nervous system.
Yeah. You find new tools along the way, and we have to recalibrate based on what our circumstances are.
Yeah.
So, Kelly, when people come to see me for therapy, people are typically in one of three places. Some people are getting started, just trying to figure out how to plant their feet and stay grounded so they can explore this aspect, this part of their journey, this part of their story. Some people are in the middle, like right in the thick of things, and they really need support navigating. And some people are looking back. They're maybe closing a chapter or just being able to tie up loose ends and look back and be clear on what they need to take forward to the next part of their journey or their life. So I'm curious about what part of the journey that you're in. Would you say that you're looking back in the middle, getting started?
I think I'm in the middle. I think I went last year. I was in a very, very dark place,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
as I think many of us have been in the last year and a half. And I was very certain I needed help. I was with the current therapist that I was, well, with the therapist I started seeing her more often.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, like a month or a month and a half into it, I was like, this is not helping me. She's not helping me. And I canceled all my appointments with her.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the right choice because her response was, oh, I see you canceled. I guess you're feeling better. And that for me was like, wow, you are really like, you were not listening to me.
Not aware.
You were very much not listening to what I was saying and how,
Yeah.
like, it was the darkest place I've ever been in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I found somebody else, and it's been great with her. It's been hard. She doesn't let me get away with my talking about her or
All right. No, like she's helping you break all your habits, right?
yes.
So that you can keep diving deeper
Yeah.
and deeper. Okay, so I guess I'm curious, when you say you're in the middle, would you say is it you feel like you're still in the middle because in the last year you went through some other changes and recognized that you have some other work that still needs to be done? Is that what
Yeah.
you mean?
Well, I think I mean the circumstances have been really extreme, right? The circumstances
Mm-hmm.
we're in. I mean, it's been. I think everybody has lived the pandemic differently, but to live the pandemic with three very, very young children who need
Mm-hmm.
you all the time, I felt like I could not even breathe.
Mm-hmm.
And there was just a lot going on, and also not having family here. All my family's in other parts of the world,
Mm-hmm.
and the borders right now feel like really far. It's not like you just hop on a plane and you go visit, or it's just right now it feels almost impossible
Yeah.
to see family. Um,
Yeah.
So it's just like, and having self-compassion, that's my biggest work right now. Is it's hard to have compassion for others if I don't know. Actually, no, I am pretty good at having compassion for others, but I'm not good at having compassion for myself. And that's the thing. When I started with my new therapist, she's like, what do you want to work on? And I said, I need self-compassion. I need to give myself a break, because I don't. I'm
Hmm.
very hard on myself, and I need to give myself a break. So the fact that I'm like looking at yarn for an hour, it says very good things about my therapy process.
Yeah, it actually really does. And, with your continued self compassion work and development, who knows, it might become your healing signature for what else is to come on your journey?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious. I mean, you did talk about gratitude. So I'm curious, what would you say that you're grateful for with encountering this journey of your untold story about, conservative patriarchy and learning about sexual health and eroticism?
Well, I because I have traveled within different worlds, I am able to help my clients better. I am able to understand where they come from or where they are in a different way, because I have, let's say, a broader view of the world, because I have lived in different ways, and I have seen different things.
Hmm. Right. So that perspective and the insight, it's so broad and well-rounded that you're able to really support people from all walks of life, from all over. That must be a really nice feeling.
Well, it's really nice when I see like these clients I just finished. Well, not finished, but these who, when they came to me, like if they hadn't been working with me, they would have ended up in a divorce, and I'm certain of that because of how they were. And now they're in the loveliest of marriages. They are so incredibly happy. They are just so evolved. Their sex life is the best they've ever had. Um, and it's not just the sex, it's like all parts of their relationship have evolved, because when I help my clients with sex, it's not usually it's not only about sex, or it's mostly not about sex, it's about a lot of other things. um,
Right.
you can't separate, as I mentioned earlier in the episode, you can't separate sex from life, and from other things that are happening, and other ways of that you are relating to your partner or to yourself. Um, so yeah, I'm very grateful
Yeah.
for that to be able to, to not, I know like people are walking on this earth, and it's just like it's small impacts, but I really believe that to leave the world in a better shape that you found it in, I think that is incredibly important for me. So to know that I have created impact, even if it's just like 5 people or 10 people, it doesn't need to be millions. It's not a quantity thing. It's just like I know that I have, and it's not an ego thing. It's just like the world is a better place. People are happier. They're in a better space because of the help that they got from me, and the journey.
Yeah, it's a felt sense that you're
Yeah.
experiencing, right? Yeah. So, Kelly, coming back to mental health and your story and unpacking some of the aspects that you've shared today with the conservative patriarchy and, going towards your path of, learning about literature, erotic literature, sexuality, all of your curiosities about sexology, all of these pieces. How would you say during this journey your mental health was impacted? Were there any particular struggles that you had or any particular things that you can recall?
Well, I've suffered from depression throughout my life.
Okay.
Very bad depression.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I've never been medicated, but I have
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of help to get me out of those places.
Mm-hmm.
Were they part of my journey? Probably. I have found, for me, acupuncture, Reiki, and therapy have been my saviors through for my mental health. And compassion, so both self-compassion when I find it, and absolutely compassion and support from my loved ones. Um, from my mother when I was younger, from my husband currently.
But when you talk about the depression, do you remember what sorts of emotions that you were experiencing, or what sorts of toll you were noticing that was being brought on in your mind?
So in my depression, a lot of darkness and immobility, like I can't move. I remember very clearly this episode in my 20s, and I had this party I really, really wanted to go to, but I was in my bathroom, sitting in my bathroom, and I just couldn't.
Were you feeling numb?
It wasn't numb. No, I just couldn't move it. I just could not um, get the strength or get the incentive to get up and get dressed and get into my car and go. There was no more. It was just like stuck. Like stuck, and there's like, I wear glasses, and there's like this, as if the glasses have been changed and everything I look at is terrible. And then last year when I had a big breakdown, yes, because I forgot my wallet, and I was like in the parking lot of a Home Depot, because that's where I was picking up something. I was just bawling, and I called my best friend, and she just heard me cry for a really long time until I was ready and able to like drive myself home.
And so, do you notice that? It seems like what you're sharing with me in terms of what you experienced last year. Do you feel like it was a repeat at all of what you experienced when you felt that immobility in your 20s? Or was this just us?
Yes, it's very similar. I think last year was the worst I've ever been. Like, it has been the darkest place.
The darkest of the dark.
Yeah. It was really bad.
Well, I'm really glad that you were able to get the help that you needed throughout your journey, right? Throughout the different points, and to feel strong enough to say, this doesn't feel right. I'm going to try something different. Or I know this thing is good for me, but this part of it is not good for me. I need to switch it up. I need to change the activity. I need to change the person. And that you're really in tuned with yourself and listening to the subtleties that are coming up for you. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind, is that you have been listening to your body, you have been listening to your mind, and no matter what sort of struggle or strife that we're going through, if you're listening to your process and paying attention, you're still in control.
Yeah, and I also have had like very amazing support, especially like this last time. Like, my husband was there, he took over the children, he took over everything, he was just there to see what it was that I needed, and what very similar. I mean, well, not similar to, no, I guess postpartum depression was a whole other thing. Yeah, well, that was a whole other animal to tackle.
Right. So Kelly, what would be your key message to the listeners of our show?
Mental health looks very differently for everyone, and to be aware of what it is that you need. You need to figure it out yourself, or get a professional to help you figure it out. But very often your friends and family can't help you. Like, they're not the ones that are there. They're there to support you, but not to fix you.
Yes.
So yes, like, take the support that you can have, but you need to fix yourself, and find the help that it is you need. As I mentioned, like, I've never taken medication, but for some people that's the right thing to do. For me, acupuncture works really well for depression, but for others it wouldn't. So it's finding the tools that will support you, and of course therapy is magic.
Yes. And it's different. It's you have to pay attention to what's good for you, like you were saying, right? So different strokes for different folks, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and and then we're moving back to sex. Different strokes for different folks.
Exactly. Right. And when you talk about all of the things that you've spoken about, it almost reminds me of this idea that, even when there's twists and turns, you can choose to twist and turn as you wish. Like, you can still be in control of the twisting and the turning. You don't, right? You don't have to let the twisting and turning be dictated in any way. You can be the dictator of it. Kelly, how can people connect with you? What's the best way?
Well, my website is awokenbeauty.com, and then you can find me on Instagram and Twitter the same way, awokenbeauty. And I also have two free communities for women and female identified individuals. One is in Spanish and one is in English. They live in Facebook, and they are called Awakened by Awoken Beauty. They're secret groups. Or not, they're hidden. Like, you need to be pre-approved.
Okay, so private groups.
Private, yes, not secret, private groups, sorry. But I'm mostly active on Facebook. No, sorry, on Instagram. And you can also like subscribe to my newsletter, and then you'll find out all the things I'm doing.
Sorry, on your social handles. So what's the name?
Awoken Beauty.
Awoken Beauty for Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook?
Yeah.
Okay, Kelly, guess what?
What?
You have just dared yourself to share. Congratulations.
Thank you.
What was that experience like for you?
It was good. I spoke about things that I don't usually share. I don't share a lot about my personal journey with my mental health struggles. So yeah, it was good.
Well, as I mentioned from the start, I really am grateful for your willingness to have this open and raw conversation with me about what often does not get spoken about.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate the authenticity and vulnerability that you brought to the forefront of this conversation. So thank you very much for sharing. And once again, Kelly, thank you for being part of Dare to Share Your Untold Story and being a helping voice in breaking down the barriers of mental stigma.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
To all of our listeners, if you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and you want to be part of breaking down barriers of mental stigma, I invite you to go wherever you are listening to the episode and hit subscribe. Leave us a comment or a review of the episode and maybe how you relate to it. To learn more about what we offer, visit www.daretoheal.co. And if you are feeling ready and brave to share, please submit your story by visiting www.daretoshare.co. Thanks for joining in.